Hello my dear students, welcome to our channel Rajesh Biology and I am Rajesh MSc Zoology. Before going to know about the working of heart, you must watch the structure of heart also because you must have some idea of the parts of the heart. Then only you can understand the working mechanism. Working of heart or cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle means these are the cyclic events which occur from beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next heartbeat. ఒక హార్ట్ బీట్ బిగిన్ దగ్గర నుంచి లబ్ అనే సౌండ్ దగ్గర వచ్చినప్పటి నుంచి నెక్స్ట్ మళ్ళీ లబ్ అనే సౌండ్ వచ్చేదాకా ఆర్ ఒక జాయింట్ డయాస్టోల్ స్టేజ్ నుంచి ద రిమైనింగ్ నెక్స్ట్ స్టేజ్ వచ్చేంత వరకు వచ్చే ఈవెంట్స్ అన్నీ కూడా ద ఈవెంట్స్ విచ్ అక్కర్ బిట్వీన్ one heartbeat to the next heartbeat constitute called cardiac cycle because these are the cyclic events. All these events are cyclic, and the cardiac cycle have three main phases. They are atrial systole first, atrial systole, and ventricular systole, and joint diastole. It is also known as cardiac diastole. The cardiac cycle, which I explain now, is start with the joint diastole stage. Joint diastole nunchi start chedam. We will begin with the relaxed state of heart. That means all the four chambers are in relaxed state. From one heartbeat to the next heartbeat means oka relaxed state nunchi another relaxed state varaku madhyalo jarige events anni kuda cardiac cycle. And I would like to re-explain some parts which are involved in working of heart. The main parts are apertures. Apertures are the connections between two chambers because, for example, atrioventricular aperture connects the atria and ventricle, and the aperture, the opening of the pulmonary aorta or the opening of the systemic aorta connects the ventricle and pulmonary arch or ventricle and systemic arch. So first apertures which connects the chambers, and next arches, aortic and pulmonary arches. Pulmonary arch take the blood, deoxygenated blood towards the lungs, and systemic arch takes the blood towards the remaining body parts except lungs. Okay, aortic arches. And next nodal tissue. Nodal tissue is also present and it play very key role in working of heart because nodal tissue, a patch of the nodal tissue which is present in right upper corner of the right atrium known as SAN, generate action potential. Okay, it initiates the working of heart. It initiates the all the remaining contractions. So nodal tissue is also very important in working mechanism. So these are the three main structures. You should know about these structures for better understanding of the working of heart. Right. Okay, చిన్న brief introduction తీసుకుందాం. Right. First, heart receives the blood from different body parts. The deoxygenated blood enter into the right atrium and it receives the blood from lungs. That means oxygenated blood. Okay, I'll draw the lungs also. Then you can understand clearly. This is the heart position. What is this? Mediastinum cavity. Heart is present in between the two lungs and that space is known as mediastinum. It is trachea. Okay, heart is safely positioned in between two lungs. Okay, right, it receives oxygenated blood. Left one receives oxygenated blood and right one receives deoxygenated blood through inferior vena cava and superior vena cava. Okay, inferior vena cava is guarded with eustachian valve in fetus heart. Okay, and there is another structure coronary sinus, and it receives the blood from wall of the heart. So it is the position. We are start with the joint diastole stage. That means to the beginning. The beginning is all the four chambers are relaxed in condition. Then what happened? First, sino-auricular node generate action potential. Now you have to contract అని చెప్పేసి ఒక మెసేజ్ పంపిస్తుంది. And that message is speedily spread all over the wall of the atria and they undergo contraction. But before the contraction, the blood enter into the ventricles. Why? Because of the opening of atrioventricular apertures. The apertures are opened in joint diastole stage. So the blood which enter into the atria automatically enter into the ventricles without any contraction. That means the blood flow is passive. Okay, nearly 70% of the blood enter into the ventricles without any contraction. Just before the contraction, the blood అంటే ఆ బ్లడ్ రావడమే వెంట్రికల్స్లో పడేలాగనమాట. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, టేక్ ఏ బాక్స్ అండ్ బాక్స్ని ఉల్టా చేయండి. అట్ ద అబోవ్ సైడ్ దెర్ ఈజ్ ఏ ట్యూబ్ అండ్ ద ట్యూబ్ ఈజ్ సుపీరియర్ వెనా కేవా అండ్ దట్ బాక్స్ నేమ్ ఈజ్ atria and the opening is not covered with any cap. So the blood which enter into the atrial bottle automatically enter into the box which is present under the atria. So 70% of the blood enter into the ventricles without any contraction, just before the contraction. Right. At that time, gradually sinoatrial node generate action potential and that action potential reach all over the wall of the atria and they undergo contraction. When atria undergo contraction, the remaining 30% blood enter into the ventricles. So atria not send the blood, but the contraction of atria increases the blood flow. That means 30% of the blood flow is increased by the atrial contraction. If atria is not working, due to some conditions atria is not working, what happened? Nothing is happened because the complete blood enter into the ventricles due to the opening of atrioventricular aperture. అలా అని చెప్పి మీరు దీన్ని సీరియస్గా తీసుకుని ఏట్రియా పని చేయకపోయినా పర్వాలేదని మాత్రం అనుకోవద్దు. ఎగ్జాంపుల్ కోసం చెప్తున్నాను. ఏట్రియాలో ఇక్కడ ఏట్రియా యూజ్ ఏం లేదు. ఏట్రియా ఈజ్ అన్ఫంక్షనల్. దీని యొక్క యూజ్ కానీ ఏమీ లేదు ఇక్కడ. ఏట్రియా కంట్రాక్ట్ అయినా అవ్వకపోయినా ద బ్లడ్ ఎంటర్ ఇన్ టు ద వెంట్రికల్స్ అండ్ దట్ ఏట్రియల్ సిస్టోల్ టేక్స్ 0.1 second. Very speed. If we divide the 1 second into 10 parts, the 1/10, okay? Atrial systole takes 0.1 second. Next, ventricular systole. When the blood enter into the ventricles, at the same time, the impulses are taken by AVN. AVN, atrioventricular node, act as a relay point. So, it takes the nerve impulses from SAN and send to the His bundle, and that His bundle is present in interventricular septum and it divides into two branches, and that branches give some small branches, minute branches known as Purkinje fibers. Okay, so that impulses are travel through the bundle of His and bundle branches and Purkinje fibers and reach the entire wall of the ventricle and that ventricle undergo contraction. When ventricle squeezes, the pressure increases rapidly and that increased pressure push the tricuspid and bicuspid walls. Okay, the tricuspid and bicuspid walls are forcefully closed during ventricle systole, ventricle contraction. When the impulses are reach the musculature of the ventricles undergo contraction and due to the contraction the pressure is increased and that increased pressure push the bicuspid and tricuspid walls at the same time and they are closed simultaneously and produce a sound known as lub. And that first heart sound is lub. First heart sound is produced in ventricular systole. When ventricle undergo contraction, the tricuspid and bicuspid walls are forcefully closed and produce first heart sound lub. And then next, what happened? That pressure is increased more and more. So, due to the closure of the atrioventricular walls, that means bicuspid and tricuspid walls, the blood enter into the pulmonary and systemic aortic arches. Now, what happened? In atrial systole phase also, the walls, semilunar walls are closed. In ventricular systole also, they are closed. At the beginning of the ventricular systole also, they are closed. In this time, when the pressure is increased more than the ఇక్కడ ఇందాక మీకు చెప్పాలనుకుని మర్చిపోయిన విషయం ఏంటంటే ఫస్ట్ మీరు కండిషన్స్ చూడండి. ఇన్ జాయింట్ డయాస్టోలిక్ స్టేజ్ వాట్ హ్యాపెండ్, ఇట్ ఈస్ ద ఏట్రియం అండ్ the walls are opened and it is the ventricle and it is the pulmonary arch, and pulmonary arch is closed with walls. This is the condition in joint diastole stage. In joint diastole stage, these walls are open and semilunar walls are closed. In atrial systole, these walls are open, these walls are closed. So there is no change in walls, okay, but atria undergo contraction. Next, blood enter into the ventricle. In this condition also, both are same. When ventricle undergo contraction, these walls are closed first, and then next, due to the pressure, these walls are open. Clear? As like the blood is enter into the ventricle. Now blood is present in ventricle and ventricles undergo contraction. Due to the pressure, the walls are closed and that blood enter into the systemic and pulmonary aortic arches, and the walls are forcefully pushed by the blood, and that blood forcefully ejaculated into the systemic circulation and pulmonary circulation. It is about ventricular systole and it takes 0.3 seconds. 0.3 seconds. Next, what happened? మనం ఎంత స్లోగా చెప్తున్నా ఎంత స్లో మూమెంట్ జరగదు. ఇప్పటికే చాలా హార్ట్ బీట్స్ అయిపోయి ఉంటాయి మనకి. ఓకే, విత్ ఇన్ 1 minute మొత్తం ఈవెంట్స్ అన్నీ కూడా కంప్లీట్ అయిపోతాయి. విత్ ఇన్ 1 second. ఓకే, 1 minuteకి 72 beats. సో విత్ ఇన్ 1 second మొత్తం కంప్లీట్ అవుతుంది అనమాట. 0.3 seconds ఫర్ వెంట్రికులర్ సిస్టోల్. నెక్స్ట్, జాయింట్ డయాస్టోల్. ఆఫ్టర్ వెంట్రికులర్ కంట్రాక్షన్, then the pressure decreases gradually. That increased pressure decreases gradually. It is the atrial systole and ventricular systole. Ventricle systolic pressure is increased and then next decreased. So due to the decreasing pressure, the walls which are opened forcefully, that means semilunar walls which are present in systemic arch and pulmonary arch, which are opened forcefully with the blood, are closed. ఎప్పుడైతే ఇవి డయాస్టోలిక్ ఉందో ఆటోమేటికల్లీ మీకు క్లియర్ డయాగ్రామ్ వేయాలంటే కనుక ఇట్ ఈస్ ద ఏట్రియా, ఇట్ ఈస్ ద వెంట్రికల్ అండ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ arch, aortic arch. When it undergo relaxation, the pressure decreases. When the pressure decreases, the blood which enter into the systemic or pulmonary arch is try to come back and it closes the walls. The walls also closed. Due to the closure of the walls, due to the closure of the semilunar walls, the second heartbeat is produced. So first heartbeat is produced in ventricular systole. Second heartbeat is produced in cardiac diastole, and cardiac diastole takes 0.4 seconds. Total 0.8 8 seconds. So this is about working of heart. And of course there are so many things present in working mechanism. అవన్నీ మనకి ఇంటర్మీడియట్లో అంతగా లేవు. ఎస్సీఆర్టీలో అంతవరకు మనం డిస్కస్ చేసాం. నీట్ లెవెల్లో కూడా మనం కావాలంటే తర్వాత వేరే క్లాస్లో చెప్పుకుందాం. బట్ అకార్డింగ్ టు అవర్ ఎస్సీఆర్టీ, వర్కింగ్ ఆఫ్ హార్ట్ ఆర్ కార్డియక్ సైకిల్ ఈజ్ కంప్లీటెడ్ నౌ. Cardiac cycle means the beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next constitute called cardiac cycle. And cardiac cycle have three events. They are atrial systole, ventricular systole and cardiac diastole. First, atrial systole. Atria undergo contraction due to pacemaker. Pacemaker generate the action potential and that action potential reach the all over the atrial wall and atria undergo contraction. But what happened? Before the atrial contraction, the blood enter into the ventricles due to the opening of bicuspid and tricuspid walls. Clear? And it takes 0.1 second. This is about the atrial systole. And atrial systole increases the flow of the blood into the ventricles. 30% of the blood enter into the ventricles after atrial systole. Next, ventricular systole. The blood enter into the ventricles. Now blood is present in ventricle and the action potential reaches the ventricle walls also through bundle fibers and ventricles undergo contraction. When ventricles undergo contraction due to the increased pressure, the atrioventricular walls are closed and first heart sound lub is produced. And then next, that increased pressure increases more and more and that pressure pushes the semilunar walls and enter into systemic and pulmonary arches. So it is about the ventricular systole and it takes 0.3 seconds. Next, cardiac diastole. When the ventricle systole is during the ventricle systole, the auricles undergo relaxation simultaneously. Okay, and then next ventricles also undergo relaxation and that stage which is present for 0.001 second. Okay, very very minute time. That is cardiac diastole. During the ventricle diastole, the blood wants to re-enter into the ventricle due to the decreasing pressure. But with that force, they closes the walls of the arches known as semilunar walls are closed. Due to the closure of semilunar walls, the second heartbeat dub is produced. This is about joint diastole and it takes 0.3 seconds. And atria is ready for receiving the blood. Ventricle also ready to fill with the blood. That is cardiac events are cyclic events. Okay, and there is some important points known as stroke volume. The volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle for each heartbeat. ఒక వెంట్రికల్ బయటికి సెండ్ చేస్తున్న బ్లడ్ పర్ ఈచ్ మినిట్ పర్ ఈచ్ హార్ట్ బీట్ ఒక్కసారి కంట్రాక్ట్ అయినప్పుడు బయటకు వస్తున్న వాల్యూమ్ ఏదైతే ఉందో దాన్ని స్ట్రోక్ వాల్యూమ్ అంటాం. ఫస్ట్ వన్ స్ట్రోక్. ఓకే, ఫర్ స్ట్రోక్ ద వాల్యూమ్ ఆఫ్ బ్లడ్ విచ్ ఈజ్ సెండ్ అవుట్ బై ద ఈచ్ వెంట్రికల్ ఫర్ one stroke, that means one heartbeat, is known as stroke volume. It is nearly 70 ml. And another word, cardiac output. Cardiac output means the volume of blood which is sent out by the each ventricle per each minute. Cardiac output means the volume of blood which is sent out by each ventricle per each minute. Each beat అయితే 70 ml. For each minute means there are 72 beats per minute. So 70 into 72 is 5040. That means nearly 5 ml. 5 liters. That is nearly 5 liters. So it is known as cardiac output. Now come to the double circulation. Right. Double circulation, it is very easy. Heart is present in between the two lungs and it sends blood to the lungs for purification, which is already learned by you in respiration. Okay, and tissues produce deoxygenated blood, and that is carried into the heart through superior and inferior vena cavas. Okay, all the issues are known by you. What is double circulation? Okay, there is two circulations. One is lesser circulation and another one is greater circulation, or one is pulmonary circulation or it is systemic circulation. Greater circulation is also known as systemic circulation. Pulmonary circulation is known as lesser circulation. Why it is called lesser? The deoxygenated blood enter into the pulmonary arch and it enter into the lungs. Okay, from the lungs, the oxygenated blood carried towards the left atria. It is known as lesser circulation. పక్కనే ఉంటాయి కదా lungs. And pulmonary circulation. Next, the oxygenated blood which enter into the left ventricle is enter into the systemic arch and it carries the oxygen and nutrients toward the different types of tissues, and after diffusion it carried towards the right atria, and this circulation is known as systemic circulation or greater circulation, and it is double circulation. This is about the working of heart. Thank you.